Welcome back on this Friday night double header. I am delighted to welcome back two extremely important guests. We've got Larry Klayman and Laura Loomer, two powerhouses. How are you guys doing tonight?
We're doing well. We're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
Great.
Bake and bake.
And judges around the country are quaking in their boots when they hear that the two of you might team up. We're going to touch on that in a second, but Laura, you were just having dinner with James O'Keefe, another legend in the world of alternative media. What's going on with James O'Keefe?
Well, James and I are very good friends. I used to work for James actually when I was an undercover journalist at Veritas, and we were just catching up, talking about James Comey's downfall and, the plans that we both have. And James will be coming out with a new investigation soon, so stay tuned. He will be releasing a video very soon, and I've seen it, or parts of it at least, and it's very damning, and I'm sure it's going to be another explosive Veritas hit.
And is that, I know you can't tell us much about it, but is that having to do with the DOJ, or what's the nature of that upcoming video?
About what it concerns, but it's definitely going to, blow some minds, as all Veritas videos do.
Right. And of course, Laura, just the other day, you and I were over here at Barnes & Noble. You had an incredible encounter with Mr. Comey. Just going to play that for everybody here real quick.
Hey, Mr. Comey. Hey, how is it ethical to brief the President of the United States on an unverifiable and salacious dossier? And how is it ethical leadership to not tell him that his political opposition, Hillary Clinton, paid for that? You didn't disclose that information. Why didn't you disclose to President Trump that his opposition paid for the material?
When Laura started questioning James Comey about the ethics of not telling Donald Trump that the salacious dossier came from the Clinton Foundation, essentially a Clinton campaign. You were kind of rushed out of there, Laura, but I mean, that was classic Loomer right there. James Comey had nothing to say but stand there and look dopey.
Yeah, well, I just find it to be hilarious because here James Comey is, and he thought that he was going to have a super successful book tour. And the same day that James Comey launched his book, when we showed up to Barnes & Noble, 11 lawmakers in Congress filed a criminal referral against him and delivered it to the desk of the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, calling for him and many others, many of his associates, Hillary Clinton, Loretta Lynch, Andrew McCabe, Strauss, Page, to be prosecuted. And it came out last night that the memos that Comey leaked to his friend, who is a professor, as well as the New York Times, were redacted. Congress had to redact these memos because they contain classified information. And at the bottom of the memo, it literally says that the redacted parts indicate classified material. So Comey lied, right? He testified and said that he did not share classified information, told everybody he did not share classified information. And, just like Hillary Clinton, he shared classified information.
Now, Larry, an FBI source has told me that James Comey basically he violated the National Foreign Intelligence Program manual. He breached Attorney General guidelines for the conduct of a national security investigation and broke the law when he leaked that information after he was fired. What are the implications of this referral to the...
That's right. I don't take much in terms of what's going to happen. I mean, it's more for show, not for dough. You've got congressmen making referrals. We've gone back 20, 30 years. Nothing's ever happened. I took action when I was running Judicial Watch, now Freedom Watch. We have to take matters into our own legal hands. Laura's doing that by challenging Comey. In public, you were there, Jason. We're getting the word out. But we need a special counsel, and that's why, without my harping on it too much, I've actually put myself forward, and I hope people will go to freedomwatchusa.org, sign the petition. We've got about 22,000 signatures at this point and growing daily. And the president needs to take control. He's the head of the executive branch. These clowns up on Capitol Hill, I mean, they can make a lot of waves and get on Hannity and Fox News and whatever and get reelected and raise money. But in the end, they don't do anything. And of course, Sessions is inert. He's under investigation by Mueller himself for alleged Russian collusion, however ridiculous that is. But he takes it seriously, and he's buried his head in the sand. And just this afternoon, as we were talking about before the show, he's now threatened to resign if Trump does the right thing and fires Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein. Let's hope that happens and we get rid of both of them. But nothing's going to happen at the Justice Department. I'm really disgusted as a former alumnus that it's turned into a cesspool of corruption.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that threat, or whatever you want to call it, from Sessions. I was reading True Pundit just before we began, and apparently Sessions told the White House that Rosenstein's firing could prompt his departure. I mean, that's such a funny thing for him to threaten. That could be kind of killing two birds with one stone right there. Jeff Sessions has been virtually totally ineffective, hasn't he, Larry?
Less than ineffective. If he was simply incompetent, that would be one thing. He may be that too, but he is blocking. He's actually obstructing justice at the Justice Department. He's not allowing investigations to proceed. He's not naming special counsels. He's burying his head in the sand. And we know what he did on the Bundy case. You know, that's how we all met many months ago. He wouldn't review that. And when he finally said he was going to review it, when Judge Navarro was forced to dismiss the case with all the prosecutorial misconduct, 2 weeks later, as prosecutors in Nevada, Steve Myray, the corrupt then acting U.S. attorney, and Dan Sheese, his second corrupt in charge, files a motion for reconsideration of the dismissal of the Bundy superseding indictment. I mean, he talks out of both sides of his mouth, and you know, he may seem like a nice guy, and I thought he was at one time, but nice guys don't obstruct justice, and they protect their president. He's not actually holding President Trump out to dry.
Yeah. Now, Larry, did I just understand what you said correctly, that they're talking about overturning the decision to dismiss the Bundy trial?
They are. That'll never happen, Jason, because first of all, it was dismissed based on prosecutorial misconduct, which was developed during the Bundy trial. But there's a lot more out there. This whistleblower, Larry Wooten, who came forward, the BLM whistleblower, who tells you about kill lists for the Bundys and some of the protesters, targets with X's on their heads as if they're going to be shot hanging on the walls of BLM, remarks calling the Bundys subhuman and retards. That never came out because Navarro was actually protecting the BLM. And the last day, we were all there, she went after the FBI because BLM had the hand-picked person of Harry Reid that had been running it during this tragedy, during this tyranny, and she was in fact protecting her benefactor, Senator Harry Reid, who had gotten her job as federal judge. That's how corrupt the whole system is.
Wow.
And if I am appointed special counsel to do a little bit more of promotion here, I'll have the full powers of the Justice Department. I'll be able to impanel grand juries. I'll be able to take this to a conclusion and use U.S. Marshal Services once we get convictions to arrest these people and throw them in prison. And that's why I would, in effect, be the Attorney General by appointment. But Sessions, forget it. Rosenstein, he's corrupt. And they're worried that if they push too hard, all of these deep state Clinton-Obama career people and appointees at the Justice Department will start leaking information about them. And of course, the intelligence agencies, which are still controlled by Obama deep state holdovers, will start spewing forth dirt that they've collected on all of them. So it's right. Mutual assured destruction. And President Trump needs to take matters into his own hands, and he needs to appoint me special counsel or find someone else to do it who has the guts to do it. But frankly, I don't know anybody else.
Yeah, and I don't consider it self-promotion, Larry. I want everybody to go to freedomwatchusa.org, read what's written there, and make the decision to sign the petition. We need somebody serious in there like Larry, somebody who is not afraid to do what's right, and somebody who is not beholden to this deep state situation. I think it's even more serious than most people realize. This is like a completely unprecedented thing in the history of our country. And you just brought up Rod Rosenstein, Larry. This is a very important player in this entire matter. I wanted to ask both of you guys, you know, Rod Rosenstein's wife worked in the Clinton Department of Justice, Rosenstein was involved in the whole Travelgate investigation. Of course, the Clintons were never found guilty for that, although an innocent government employee's life was ruined over the legal fees he had to pay defending himself. He was ultimately found not guilty, but he lost all his money. He was dragged through the dirt. Rosenstein did nothing about Bill Clinton receiving tons of money from what is essentially a fraudulent university, this laureate situation, but they were super aggressive in going after the Trump university. And of course, Rosenstein's role in the whole Ramboxy deal, that fraudulent Indian pharmaceutical company that was used to basically sell useless, untested, and possibly harmful pharmaceuticals to HIV and AIDS sufferers in Africa, something that the Clinton Foundation was never legally organized to do. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, as you would say. Rosenstein is a disaster. Why did Trump put him there?
Understand this type of animal. Okay, you understand it. Laura understands it. We're taking them on. Laura's being very courageous and doing what she's doing. You, others. But these are people who go along to get along. They have to scratch the backs of the establishments of both political parties. Rosenstein was the former U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland, first appointed by George W. Bush, reappointed by Barack Obama. Mueller himself has been appointed by both Democrat and Republican establishment presidents to his posts. They don't ever want to offend anyone in the establishment, but they'll go after people who aren't the establishment. And of course, President Trump is not the establishment. In fact, he's an anathema. He's a threat to the establishment of both political parties. And there was an article yesterday that the Republicans are undecided, this establishment in Congress, as to whether they're going to support President Trump if he runs for re-election. There are Republicans now who are proposing a legislation, including Lindsey Graham and others, that you can't fire Mueller unless you go to some corrupt federal judge to put Mueller back in place. You know, this is what we're dealing with. And the Democrat and Republican parties are flip sides of the same coin. One is left, one purports to be right. But they're both part of an elite that cashes in at the registers of Washington, D.C., that makes money, that has power. They have lunch together. They go to soirees in Georgetown and elsewhere. It's one giant party. It's a corrupt party, but no pun intended.
Right.
There used to be a Russian comedian, I think it was Yakov Smirnov, Jewish, by the way, who they asked him why he came to the United States. And he says, well, in the United States, you know, you can get invited to parties, but in the Soviet Union, the party comes to you. Well, I think we've got it both ways in Washington these days, and we're getting it up the rear end, to put it mildly. The country's going down the drain with this party that's going on there.
But Trump is being effective, actually. There was just an announcement today that North Korea is going to suspend nuclear missile tests, and they're closing nuclear missile testing sites. I mean, this is an unprecedented positive development in this volatile region of the world. Laura, you've been right there, front and center, exposing corruption like crazy, and you've met with legal resistance. What's happening with that thing in Florida?
Well, before I go on, I mean, you mentioned North Korea. The thing about the left is they would honestly rather see nuclear war with North Korea than admit that Donald Trump is doing good things for this country. That's the left for you, all right? So, you know, the left right now, Donald Trump is probably the only president in U.S. history that is like, engaged in peaceful dialogue with Kim Jong-un and talked about or even moved close to the denuclearization of North Korea. And what is the left doing? Instead of cooperating and giving him props and supporting him in his efforts, they're trying to destroy him. They're trying to sabotage him. They're literally more concerned with partisan politics than the greater good of humanity. And I think that's what you have to understand about the left is it's not even an issue between the right and the left anymore. It's right and wrong.
Absolutely.
So,
that's a great way of putting it. But there is a war between the right and the left, and one of us is going to win and the other is going to lose. And we're making sure, the three of us, as well as our so-called comrades, that we win. And we're going to do it peacefully and legally, unlike they're doing it, which is to destroy the country and through anarchy and violence and mayhem. we're going to use legal rights like Laura did this week in confronting Comey and exposing him for the complete dishonest fraud that he is.
Right. And going on what you asked about Florida, about, I don't know, what was it, 3 weeks ago or so, I was covering the North Solomon trial in Orlando,
Yes.
and of course he was found not guilty, even though the jury foreman came forward and said that they knew that she was guilty in aiding her husband in committing the ISIS attack, but they couldn't give her a guilty verdict because the FBI screwed everything up as they always do, and they withheld evidence. Key evidence which showed that Omar Mateen's father was an FBI informant during the time of the shooting, while also being an active supporter of the Taliban. How does that happen?
Wow.
I don't know, but that happened under James Comey's leadership at the FBI. So, maybe another question for someone to ask Comey. But the judge, Judge Byron, he is an Obama-appointed judge, and he stripped me of my media credentials because I confronted Noor Solomon's family outside of the courthouse and asked them if they would denounce jihad, and they refused. And then on top of that, they pretty much gave me a paper arrest and banned me from the courthouse and told me that if I ever come back to the Orlando courthouse, I will be arrested for trespassing.
What?
Which was a violation of my rights. And so then Larry's going to represent me. But they're out of control. These judges, especially these Obama judges, they think they can just get away with anything.
It's
Well,
really
they're the worst.
ridiculous.
I mean, I always say that when the revolution breaks out, and I say this figuratively, the judges should be the first to be taken to the guillotines, because they're the ones that are there to protect us from the tyranny of the other two branches of government and ourselves. And they're basically bought and paid for by the politicians that got them their jobs. They're just simply a rubber stamp. There was a judge yesterday in Massachusetts, her last name begins with a G, Gertner, something to that effect, and she issued some bizarre statement that Mueller didn't do anything wrong in a case that she had years ago. She found some way to do that. Well, guess who appointed her? Bill Clinton. I mean, this is what we're going through today. Yesterday, our favorite, Amy Berman Jackson, in the district court in Washington, D.C., again denies bail to Paul Manafort and suggests that Mueller did not exceed the scope of his mandate when he indicted Manafort. She's a complete political hack. I've been in front of her. I had her for a case involving, and I still do, Hillary Clinton, wrongful death for exposing the whereabouts of Ty Woods and Sean Smith, the sons of Patricia Smith and Charles Woods, who died with Ambassador Chris Stevens at Benghazi. By using that private email server that was hacked, the terrorists were able to find out where they were and killed them. And this judge dismissed this case, which also contained a defamation count, on the eve of Memorial Day during the election period, to make a point to Hillary to say, hey, I'm with you, and if you win, maybe you'll give me a higher appointment. I mean, this is the way it works with these judges. And that's why I started Judicial Watch many years ago. It's why I do what I do at Freedom Watch, because it really offends me as someone who believes in theory in the legal system, not the way it's being run today, that these judges have sold out the American people, and they've become just like the yes men of King George III in the days leading up to the revolution. They need to be legally dealt with. And we can get into why they're not dealt with if you want, Jason, but the system that's set up is the judges sit in judgment of other judges, and that's why these corrupt judges continue to march on.
You know, Larry, it's so important that people understand what's going on with Freedom Watch and that they go to freedomwatchusa.org, because, I mean, what you're describing, it's not just disgusting, it's frankly, it's scary. I mean, our country is literally being controlled by criminals. The show I did just earlier today featured Pete Santilli talking about how the FBI and various operatives who were very probably paid to disrupt Pete's activities resulted in him landing in jail. And it seems quite clear that they wanted to shut down Pete's reporting on Benghazi, 9/11, everything that was going on with the Bundys over there. So we're really in a very dangerous and unprecedented time in history as far as what the people in power are able to do to suppress. I mean, you know, obviously the freedom of the press is not just some fun and funny thing. When Laura and I go over to talk to James Comey, there's nobody in there actually asking him any real questions except for Laura, and she was ejected. She's also being maligned. Right now, Raw Story, which is maybe raw garbage, is saying that right-wing conspiracy theorist is kicked out of the Comey book signing after screaming he'll get locked up. Well, Laura, I don't know if that's a conspiracy theory. He may, in fact, get locked up. And
They sound so cool, though. Like, they don't understand. They're trying to attack me with that title, but when they say, oh, some girl got kicked out of James Comey's event for telling him he's going to get locked up, I mean, God, they're just...
You remember the famous line of Woody Allen when he asks, is sex dirty? And the response is, only if you're doing it right. People used to ask me, is there a vast right-wing conspiracy? And during the Clinton years, and I say, only if we're doing it right. And what Laura did has to be done. Conspiracies are only about two people working in concert to commit a crime. My God, you've got many more than that on the left. So I think it's an honor to be called a conspiracy theorist. And there are many people, libertarians, and even some that are liberals, who will subscribe to the corruption of the Clintons, Obama, Soros, and the rest. I was out at the Bundy Ranch this week for a couple days. We were talking about future legal strategy and such. And also, Ryan Bundy is running for governor, which is great. I personally endorse him in that, because if he becomes governor, and I think he has a good chance of winning, we can set straight this land grab of the federal government throughout the West and clear up a lot of other issues. But they were showing me, I went around and we looked at what was going on during the days leading up to the successful standoff. And poor Pete Santilli, he didn't block a convoy. He was charged with obstruction of justice because he put his car in a certain place and he was set up, and BLM and the FBI claimed that he was impeding their attempts to harm the Bundys. That's my interpretation, and it's a fact, and also to seize their cattle. But Pete was indicted because he's a conservative talk show host. And this was a message that was being sent by Obama and his corrupt Justice Department to people in the media like yourself, that you should not criticize them or you're going to be retaliated against, even with criminal charges. This is criminal in and of itself.
Well, it's very interesting that you mentioned that, and it was incredibly timely that I had Pete on today. It was only the second time he and I had spoken, and I really wasn't that familiar with his situation. He shared a ton of evidence with me that leads me to believe that he was set up. He had hard evidence of hacking and other things going on. And another article, True Pundit is on fire with FBI information. We've got here a story about James Comey, who suggested putting leakers' heads on a pike, which would, of course, include him. And he laughed about jailing journalists. He wasn't laughing when Laura asked him about the ethics of not disclosing the source of the Steele dossier, nor was he laughing when he exited the venue and I asked him if he was aware of Andrew McCabe's Hatch Act violations. I would think he must have been aware that Andrew McCabe violated the Hatch Act that's intended to prevent the FBI from becoming politicized when McCabe, that is, received over $1 million from Terry McAuliffe, a Clinton close associate, specifically for the campaign of his wife's state Senate run. A gross violation of FBI ethics and all that.
Besides that gross violation, what about the fact that James Comey's brother is a lawyer for the Clinton Foundation?
That's right.
Right? I believe his name is Peter Comey. I don't ever remember that being disclosed in the media when James Comey was doing his investigation into Hillary Clinton's email scandal. I think that is grounds for a completely new investigation. How can Comey ethically, as the former director of the FBI, conduct an investigation into Hillary Clinton and say that he's not political and is no way influenced when his brother is getting paid by the Clintons for representing the Clinton Foundation?
That's right. That was out there, but it was never focused on. And Laura's absolutely right. Let me tell you what Comey's biggest scandal is. is that, as you may know, and we've talked about this before, I represented a whistleblower by the name of Dennis Montgomery, who left with more information than even Edward Snowden had with regard to illegal mass surveillance at the National Security Agency, CIA, and yes, FBI. He was a contractor. He left with 47 hard drives, 600 million pages of information, much of it classified. I met him through Sheriff Joe Arpaio's investigator, Mike Zullo. I wanted to bring him in from the cold, in effect. And I took him to the only person who I trust in Washington, Judge Royce Lamberth, who made a lot of good decisions on my behalf during the 1990s with regard to the Clintons. And we then went to James Comey through the general counsel of Comey at the FBI. Lamberth knew James Baker, the general counsel. So we took Montgomery there and we said, look, the Supreme Court justices, including the Chief Justice, are being surveilled. 156 other judges, prominent businessmen like Donald Trump, yours truly, even Judge Lamberth, and ultimately a judge who ruled in our favor in the NSA case, but then bailed out after I think he was coerced and blackmailed by the agencies, the deep state, Richard Leon. But Comey took this information in, and we got Montgomery immunity. He actually was interviewed for 3 hours under oath in a secure room at the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. And Comey buried this mass surveillance. And why did he bury it? Because we now know that the FBI was conducting illegal mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans as well. And this is the big scandal. And I've taken this to the House Intelligence Committee, to the Senate Intelligence Committee. They don't want to look into it. They just want to keep a very narrow focus on what happened with regard to unmasking of the Trump campaign. And I think the reason is, and I'm 100% sure, that these intelligence agencies and the FBI have so much dirt on them that if they push too hard, their personal and professional lives will be totally destroyed. But Comey walks away from that, and nothing's happened for 4 years since we turned all of this documentation over to him when I was assured that they were doing a bona fide investigation.
Larry, were you aware of this revelation from the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, that McCabe and his wife were neighbors for years with Bill and Hillary Clinton, and they had a friendship that spanned decades before Andrew McCabe got involved in the email probe?
I was not aware of that, but that doesn't surprise me. That's Washington, D.C., the capital of corruption.
It's so incestuous. Like, you can't make this stuff up. It's like, you just can't make it up. Some people, I've been seeing a lot of people lately say, oh, well, this is a coincidence. Well, isn't this a coincidence? I just don't think it's a coincidence. I mean, this stuff is all planned, and it is just so incestuous and so gross. I mean, I don't understand. All these people are connected somehow. Their kids all go to school with each other. Their neighbors, their wives are friends with each other. I mean, Comey, I don't know if you were watching the interview the other night with Comey and Stephanopoulos, but even Comey goes, oh, yeah, well, my wife and my daughters were marching in the Women's March. And then his wife comes on and said, oh, well, I was really sad when Hillary lost because I wanted her to win. And a lot of my friends worked in her campaign. Who are his wife's friends that are working in Hillary Clinton's campaign? And why was this not disclosed? Like, these are things that are coming out now that a lot of people and the media especially are just turning a blind eye to, that are huge discrepancies and, red flags that indicate conflict of interest and absolute corruption.
Yeah.
And people, it's like, oh, whatever, big deal.
Yeah, let me tell you a story, okay? When I was running Judicial Watch, which I founded in 1994, I always stayed away from the Washington establishment of both political parties. I didn't even go to meetings of conservatives that were trying to prop up Newt Gingrich and everybody else because he was raising money for them. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to do what I thought was right. But during one of the last White House Correspondents' dinners, I was invited by my very good friend, Paul Rodriguez, who was the editor of Insight magazine, may his soul rest in peace, a brilliant guy, my best friend in Washington in many ways, street smart. And he would advise me on a lot of things. And at that White House Correspondents' dinner was West Wing. I can tell you a little story about that if we have time. But to make a long story short, all of these Clinton people wanted to take my temperature, even though I had deposed many of them. And they would come up to me and put their arm around me. Terry McAuliffe being one of them. I deposed him twice. I had sued him a couple times and tried to be my friend. And, I said, Terry, just please don't put your hand in my pocket, okay? You're not my friend. And same thing for Gregory Craig, the lawyer who sent Ilian back to Cuba and ran the impeachment defense of Bill Clinton. This is what Washington is all about, is that it's a game, and it's a corrupt game, and they all scratch each other's backs, Democrats and Republicans. There's not a dime's worth of difference between Karl Rove and James Carville. In fact, it was no wonder that Carville had married Mary Matlin, who was a Republican who had worked for the Bush family. This is Washington, D.C., and it's why it needs to be broken up, and that's why Trump is such a threat to it, because he doesn't care. And he's got to start acting more like he doesn't care and stop following the advice of his hapless lawyers. Now, we have Giuliani that's coming in. Hopefully he'll make somewhat of a difference. But he's a recovering establishment figure. And he thinks because he's friends with Mueller, he's going to put this thing away. And I'm afraid that's not going to happen. I like Rudy, but it's not going to happen. You need the special counsel. You need to take these people apart. And if we don't get a special counsel, I'm going to reconvene a citizens grand jury in a few weeks. Maybe y'all can participate.
Yeah.
We have the right to actually impanel our own grand juries. Former Justice Scalia actually ruled that in effect in a prior Supreme Court decision. We can indict, we can try, we can convict, and then petition a federal judge to enforce it and have these people arrested and hopefully thrown in jail. Now, that may be a pipe dream, but somebody's got to take action here. If there's no special counsel, the American people need to rise up.
Right.
I'm very intrigued, Larry, that you just mentioned Gregory Craig. This is a guy who's come up lately. We've been doing a show called America's First Refugee about Harmon Wilfred and the ordeal that he's been going through. He is in New Zealand, where he's been forced to relinquish his U.S. citizenship. He's been denied New Zealand citizenship, and he describes a meeting with Gregory Craig related to Harmon's CIA contract work and things that he was doing to try to cash some gold bearer bonds for the CIA. Gregory Craig told Harmon, stop blowing the whistle on this massive financial crime that may have funded everything from Iran-Contra to 9/11. Gregory Craig told this man that he would never see his children again if he didn't drop the matter, and it's been 19 years since Harmon Wilfred has seen his children. I don't know if you're aware of that, but Gregory Craig is implicated in this.
I wasn't aware of that. And Gregory Craig, another quick story, years ago, I was pursuing a particular matter, and he asked me if I would help him, and I asked him if they would help me. It was dealing with the release of classified information over the Stuxnet virus that was inserted into Iranian centrifuges. His client was on the verge of being made the fall guy for having done that. It was actually Hillary Clinton, I'm pretty certain, that actually leaked that information of what we had done in Iran. And I met Gregory Craig, in a business setting at lunch at the Capitol Grill. And I got to tell you something, this guy is so suave, good-looking guy, smooth, okay, that he could sell anything like a snake oil salesman. You don't trust him. But I wanted to, see what he was all about, frankly. And what was interesting, though, he did tell me a story. He had been Obama's first White House counsel. And he said, I quit. And I said, why did you quit? By the way, never trust anybody with two first names as their names. Right? I said, why did you quit? He said, because Obama is so arrogant that he would not take any advice from his own lawyer. And I said, do you think it was because you weren't of his race? And he said, yeah, I think I was shut out because of that. He was actually very candid about that.
Wow.
But, the guy he's evil, okay? But he's the one that sent Ilian back to Cuba. He represented the National Council of Churches, which is essentially a communist organization.
And while we're on the subject of arrogance, I want to come back to Andrew McCabe. Apparently, it's just come out that he is going to sue the Trump administration for defamation and wrongful termination. This is the same jackass who basically pushed Robin Gritz out of the FBI and has engaged in cover-ups and obstructions of justice. He's got to be crazy. How could he be threatening such action?
These things it's great though. It's honestly great if you think about it because discovery is a wonderful thing. And if these people are really honestly going to sue, just like the Democratic Party announced today that they're going to sue for conspiracy during the election, they're just opening themselves up to more controversy because, of discovery. I mean, you know about this more than I do, Larry, but I think that they're really going to screw themselves over. I think their hubris is really going to be the death of all of them because when this information comes out, they're just going to be exposed, just like Comey was exposed last night.
Well, they did this, Laura, because they want to keep the Russian collusion narrative going right through the midterm elections, right up to the year 2020. Believe me, the way things move in district court in New York City or in Washington, D.C., this case was filed in the Southern District of New York. It'll be 10 years before this case is decided. And what will happen? What will happen, you're right, is what usually happens when the Council for American Islamic Relations decides they're going to sue somebody because we stand up to them and their connections to terrorist organizations. Once you get into discovery and you find out that they're taking money from terrorist organizations, they dismiss the case. So once you find out that Tom Perez, the head of the Democratic National Committee, is probably also aligned with terrorists because he's aligned himself with Keith Ellison, who's a card-carrying member of the Nation of Islam, I think they'll probably be running for the exits. But they're going to have fun in the interim, and they're going to use this to raise money, and they're going to use this to keep the narrative going against Trump, even then in the unlikely event Trump breaks free of Mueller and his corrupt leftist prosecutors.
Right.
And CARE, of course, came up in our conversation the last time we all got together and spoke about the situation with what was going on there in Florida, Laura. You suspect that CARE was paying the legal fees for what's her name again?
North Solomon. Yeah, I mean, look, they're one of the family representatives. His name is Ahmed Badir. He used to work for CARE, but I believe he stopped working for them during the Holy Land trial when, they were found to be a state sponsor of terrorism. And they were obviously found to be supporting Hamas, and that's why they are now listed as an official terrorist organization in UAE. But of course, under Obama refused to recognize CARE as a designated terrorist organization.
Wow.
Which kind of is funny, right? Because a Muslim region, right, a Muslim majority nation recognizes CARE as a terrorist organization, but our own country won't. I mean, that just shows you these people are so deep in the pockets of the Democratic Party and a lot of these people who they donate money to. And, they're just freely operating as a terrorist organization in this country. And not only that, too, but this weekend in Orlando, right, the same place where this trial took place, they invited a sheikh, a Syrian sheikh who is literally on camera calling for the death of gays and Jews, and on his own website advocates for suicide bombings against Jewish people, has ordered a fatwa against all Jews, calling Jews the most evil people on planet Earth. He was given a visa and was invited to come to Orlando and speak at a middle school by a lot of different Islamic organizations. His name is Sheikh Al-Nabulsi, and of course he's verified on Twitter, right? So you're not allowed to criticize Islam and be verified on Twitter, but you're allowed to be an Islamic terrorist and be verified on Twitter. And when I showed up to record this guy and to confront him at the event, there were people in CARE t-shirts registering Muslims for the event, along with ICNA, the Aisha Cultural Center, and they wouldn't let me in. And then the police officer in Seminole County threatened to arrest me. They said, if you don't leave, we're going to arrest you for trespassing on school property, even though it's a taxpayer-funded public school, which means that I and any other member of the public or the press have a right to be there.
I remember seeing that video.
And then we're into CARE and Muslim politics, so to speak. And of course, we just fortunately got rid of our last Muslim president, Barack Obama. I was vilified when I gave a speech at the World War II Memorial where I asked him to get up off his knees and put the Quran down and come out with his hands up, like Laura was with Comey. But he was in his heart a Muslim. Of course, he's half Muslim, and under Muslim law, that's that. But it created a certain narrative in this country. And just this week, I think it was yesterday, Natalie Portman, a very fine actress, Jewish actress, Israeli born, uh, decided she wasn't going to go to the Genesis Awards in Israel because she doesn't like the way Israel's defending itself in the Gaza Strip. This is the Jewish left, okay?
Yes. The Jewish left, it's like a mental illness. I hate to say it, but some of the most anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-Jew people I've ever met are left-wing Jews themselves. I mean, it's that's my personal experience with them, and I find these left-wing Jewish individuals to be just as bad as the Islamists, right? Because they're in bed with each other, and they literally align themselves and stand with people who want them dead, right? They don't even stand with people.
You're right. I want people to know this is not the Jewish people. These are the enemies of the Jewish people who have destroyed the Jewish people.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they have a megaphone because most of them live in Hollywood and they're able to use that megaphone. And it's very, very destructive. And I'm embarrassed as a Jew myself that these people are out there doing these kinds of things. You know, we had a bad enough time with Karl Marx. We don't have to make it worse today.
Yeah, well, not even just Hollywood, but media. I mean, look, a lot of people get in trouble for saying things like this about the, disproportionate representation of Jewish owners and CEOs in the media. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the CEOs and the owners of a lot of these mainstream media networks, they're all Jews. And they're not just like Jews, they're left-wing Jews. And that's why the climate in the media is so toxic. It's because you have these individuals who push these Marxist policies. They've aligned themselves. And I see you're laughing at this, but that's really honestly what
I'm not laughing at you. I'm agreeing with you. I just had a thought. Jesus was no left-wing Jew. I mean, let's bring the two religions together here because we're fighting the same battle.
You get in trouble if you bring this stuff up if you dare mention the Jewish influence in the media. But that's also a reason why there's so much anti-Semitism that's actually increasing. We're seeing like a wave
increasing.
of anti-Semitism across the country and Europe. And I hate to say it, but it's because of groups like the ADL and a lot of these left-wing Jewish owners that anti-Semitism is spreading because their policies and the stuff that they're pushing through the media, through Hollywood, and through their positions of power is so toxic that it's making people hate them. And then you have extremist organizations that then view those Jewish influencers as the representatives for the entire Jewish community. And that's why there's recently so many negative stereotypes about Jewish people. And, all three of us are Jews. And I honestly blame groups like the ADL and people like George Soros and people like what's his name? The CEO of CNN. His name is
Zucker.
Yeah, yes. I blame those.
I put something else. But
yeah,
you're right. And who was the supporter of CARE and the ADL were the ones that opposed, among other Muslim groups, President Trump's so-called travel ban in certain Muslim countries. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I remember one time I experienced an anti-Semitic judge in California by the name of William Keller. That's what was the trigger when I started Judicial Watch. And the ADL would not assist me. He made certain anti-Semitic remarks, called me Mr. Schmuckler, all kinds of things. And you know what schmuck means in Yiddish.
Yeah.
And, it's unbelievable that the ADL would not come to the defense of an average Jew, while at the same time, they were attacking Farrakhan because that helped them raise money, you see.
Yeah. Look, the ADL is very anti-Semitic. They tweeted on Kristallnacht. They actually tweeted that that it was wrong for the Forward, the Jewish Daily Forward, to recognize me as being one of the top Jewish influencers of the year, like they did. And they said that I wasn't a real Jew and that I was just an anti-Muslim bigot and that I was anti-immigration. And the first thing I said is like, why is the ADL using the anniversary of Kristallnacht to throw stones at another Jew, right? I mean, they're doing they say that they're against the defamation of Jewish people, but all they do is just defame Jewish people who don't agree with them. It's like
most Jewish people don't agree with them, and Israel has the same problem because they're very destructive of what's going on in Israel today. And you've got El Haaretz, the newspaper, and others. You've got a situation in South Tel Aviv. They're being overrun by people from Eritrea and elsewhere, rape, everything else. They can't get rid of these people because the Jewish left says it's not right if they get deported. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So,
I think there's a number of groups that want to take advantage of this division as well and promote hatred and what has now become on the internet anti-Zionism, where a lot of these people say, oh, I like Jews, but I don't like Zionists. And then the moment you say or do anything that they don't like, they just say, oh, well, you're a Zionist and we don't like you. Laura's got to go very soon, so I just want to briefly bring you guys back to this Andrew McCabe, and you were talking about CARE and discovery and all that. It's another technique that we've seen exercised quite a bit. Alex Jones is being sued, Lee Stranahan is being sued, and it's this strategic lawsuits against public participation seem to be becoming, maybe I'm just more aware of them than I've been, as I'm the victim of one as well. But this is a real abuse of our already totally screwed up legal system, where there's so much money and time wasted by people using these punitive lawsuits, and perhaps that's what they're trying to do with Laura there, although it's not a lawsuit, just these kind of punitive criminal charges. We saw the Bundys suffer from this, Pete Santilli suffer from this. What do you guys think about this?
I remember Sidney Blumenthal sued Matt Drudge back during the Clinton years, and that was, Sidney, vicious Sid. But yes, they feel that they have the wind at their back because 90% of the judges currently are Obama and Clinton appointees, ultra-leftist judges,
Right.
most of them dishonest to the core. They don't care about the rule of law. They don't care about the Constitution. They just have their agenda, and we've talked about that. So the odds are with them. But to coin a phrase from Batman, to Robin, 10 of them against 3 of us, odds slightly in our favor because we're on the right side. And I do believe that God is on our side too.
Yeah.
So Laura, I know you've got to go. Is there anything you want to share with us before we wrap you out here?
That's pretty much it. I just wanted to take the time to also thank both of you. I wanted to thank Larry for, of course, assisting me and representing me in this case in Orlando, and being there to support me. And then of course I wanted to thank you as well for being there. You showed up to the Comey event when I told you that I was going to be there. You filmed it for me, and of course you put that great video together. So I love both of you guys. You guys are great. It's always a pleasure coming on the show and talking.
It's mutual.
Thanks so much, Laura. Yeah, the feeling is
we can't
mutual.
be afraid, guys. We can't be afraid. Because if we're afraid, we're going to lose our country, and neither of you are afraid. And, it's quite exceptional.
I think Laura is definitely a role model for women everywhere. She's bold, she's fearless, she goes in there and she confronts Comey. She doesn't back down to huge police officers that grab her and do all kinds of things that they shouldn't be doing. Laura, I'm so pleased for the success that you're having. Rush Limbaugh mentioned you today, and it's just onward and upward for Laura Loomer.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
People should definitely be following Laura if they're not already on Twitter. You can find her there at lauraloomer.com, where she's been unverified by Twitter, despite the fact that violent Muslim leaders who are calling for the destruction of Jews and Americans, they get a warm reception on Twitter, along with the people who publish my mother's phone number. They're allowed to do all that, but certainly if Laura calls out Uber or whoever for throwing her out on Yom Kippur, they take away her little blue triangle or whatever it is.
Well, we can put back a double triangle in the shape of the Star of David. How's that?
That's right. And you can also find Laura's work on lauraloomer.us. You can support her journalism there. You can help her get a faster server. There it is, Illuminate Media. You get on there.
I'm making a new website, actually, illuminatingthetruth.com, coming soon. It will be faster. It's going to be more updated, and it's going to have more features. It's going to soon to be the go-to place for investigative reports and and videos. So, you know, if you
Wonderful.
haven't, you can go to illuminatingthetruth.com and subscribe, and I'll be launching my new website soon. So.
And one of my very favorite things about you, Laura, is the style that you have defined for yourself. I think that some of the formerly toughest people like James Comey become very concerned when they see Laura Loomer in the audience there at Barnes & Noble. So keep doing what you're doing, Laura. We'll see you very soon. Have a great weekend, okay?
He looms large.
Bye. Thank you. Bye. Bye to both of you. Have a good weekend.
Bye, Laura.
God bless.
So Larry, we've got about 10 more minutes. We can go into some more topics. I think it's very important that people visit freedomwatchusa.org and take a look at that petition, and hopefully they'll sign it. I mean, will we be able to get you in there as the special counsel, or are they actually fearful of someone who will do something?
Well, I hope that we can get the president's attention. He's the only one that can do it.
I see.
Sessions can't do it. He won't do it. Rosenstein, we know what he is. He's a two-faced liar, I mean, to be blunt, and he should be on his way out. It has to be the president now. He is the head of the executive branch of government, Jason. He has the authority to do that. And, you know, I'm a lot like the president. This is why I love the guy so much, is that, you know, if you're fighting the battle, and I've been fighting it now for 40 years, and I'm still fighting it, you cannot be afraid, as Justice Clarence Thomas once said at an event that I went to. I was sitting next to him at the table. You can't be afraid to get cut in Washington, D.C. And so I hope the president realizes that, you know, Larry Klayman has had his fights with judges. I've had my fights with politicians. You know, I've come away sometimes with black eyes. Hopefully I did worse to them than they did to me. But you can't have somebody in there that's pristine. You don't want a priest or a rabbi in there, or a minister. You want somebody who's a gladiator, who will go the distance and not worry about whether he gets attacked. And that's why I'm different, because most lawyers won't risk that. They're in it for the money, they're in it for the prestige. I'm way beyond that. I got beyond that many years ago. When I started Judicial Watch, you know, it was fun to go on TV, you know, and to be known. But it's not whether you're on TV, it's not whether you're on, you know, your network or anybody else's network. It's what you accomplish. And right now, as special counsel, I can clean out this entire rat's nest. So I hope that President Trump is listening. I urge people not just to go to the website and sign that petition, which I send periodically to the White House, but also inundate the White House and President Trump with emails, letters, and whatever, telling them you've got to appoint Larry Klayman, or at least meet with him and hear what he has to say.
Yeah.
But his lawyers don't want me to meet with him because his lawyers don't want a competition. They don't want anyone else to mix in. But unfortunately, they're leading him down, and they have let him down the primrose path to his own destruction.
We should also remind people, Larry, that they can support your work at Freedom Watch by donating on freedomwatchusa.org. So in addition to signing the petition, it's important that we keep Freedom Watch financially healthy. So Larry, I also want to talk a little bit about something you brought up earlier. Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney, now seems to be in his own legal jeopardy. What are the implications of that for the president? And also, what about the whole attorney-client privilege and just raiding the guy's house? This is all, we're in uncharted waters, aren't we?
This is part of the Orwellian police state that I had enjoined twice through Judge Leon, who later got, I think, compromised. But it's part of the violation, no respect for privacy rights, the Fourth Amendment on reasonable searches and seizures. It's part of a tyrannical government, a federal government that we saw with Bundy, that thinks that they can do whatever they want, that can push us around, that we can take it. Now, whether Michael Cohen did anything wrong or not, there was no justification to bust into his office and in his house and take all of his stuff without even giving his lawyers a chance to go through it first. And this is the world we live in today. So if the president doesn't have a wake-up call with that and appoint me special counsel, I don't know when he will, but he's been getting bad advice. He's been dragged along. There are a lot of things he could have done. He could have sued Comey and Mueller and the rest of them for violating his Fourth Amendment rights. In fact, he did nothing because his lawyers are telling him to play nicey nice, to do patty cakes with Mueller. Well, you can't do that, and his instincts are good. You have to be on the offense to keep people away from you on the defense. And this is where I think I can add something to the mix. So I would send letters and emails to the White House asking the president to go to Freedom Watch's website at freedomwatchusa.org, see what the people are saying, see what his supporters are saying about why you need a special counsel and why you need somebody like Larry Klayman to help you do this job, because you're not going to do it through your attorney general and you're not going to do it through the deputy attorney general. They're worthless.
They are. And Larry, before we wrap it up, there's one thing I want to bring to your attention. I want to read you a short passage from Laura's new favorite book, written by Mr. Comey. He's talking in chapter 10, which he's ironically called Roadkill, about his time as a lawyer on the Whitewater investigation. And he says, I was a junior lawyer for the committee, still working at a Richmond law firm and charging the Senate by the hour. My focus was largely on the suicide of the former Deputy White House Counsel Vince Foster and the handling of documents in his office. But my role on the Whitewater Committee was so minor and so short, I left the assignment when our son Colin died in August of 1995, that it seemed unlikely that that was the reason the senator wasn't returning my calls. Comey was talking about how he had never met Hillary Clinton, but I just found it strange how such a conspicuous chapter, passage, paragraph about the investigation of Vince Foster's suicide and the Whitewater scandal is tied, in Comey's own words, to the abrupt death of his infant child, which occurred in the hospital from a preventable bacterial infection. Obviously, connecting these events in any way would be purely speculative, but you spoke about someone being compromised, and I can't help but think that something like that would, of course, be a way that even the most honest man could be coerced into doing virtually anything. Of course, James Comey has 3 other children, and you get a little talking to from some stranger in the hallway in the hospital, and you might rethink some of your investigative strategies. Do you care to comment on this?
That's right. Well, it's a long story, but we know that 80 people plus in and around the Clintons died during that administration, many of them material witnesses. We know that lists of dead people were left on the chairs of Linda Tripp, 2 whistleblowers from the White House that I was representing that helped us uncover the first Hillary Clinton email scandal. And I know myself that my clients, my female clients, the Clinton women, Kathleen Willey and others, had their kids threatened. And my kids even came up. I had a young daughter that was born, and one of Clinton's lawyers referenced her name at a deposition once. He had no reason to know that name, and that was a veiled threat. And this is how they try to get to you through your kids. So this may have had a big impact on James Comey in taking the dive on the Hillary Clinton email investigation. It's not beyond the realm of possibility.
I mean, certainly, if that speculative scenario were remotely true, it would be a way to maintain control over someone for the duration of their children's lives. We don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but Larry, I really have to thank you for joining me tonight. I really do want to encourage people to visit freedomwatchusa.org. Our country is in a desperate situation, and we need a bold man like Larry Klayman to step up and take over. As the special counsel, we see Robert Mueller, who was the FBI director from September 4th, 2001, I think for 12 years, wasn't he? The longest tenure since the notorious J. Edgar Hoover. And I'm beginning to realize that the FBI has a long pedigree of corruption, and that's not to malign the honest field agents, the rank and file as they're called, but we got a serious problem in the administration of the FBI. And one former agent who I spoke to yesterday indicated to me that it was his personal opinion that the FBI is too far gone and needs to be decimated and rebuilt from the ground up. People who aren't currently following Larry on Twitter can find him there at Larry E. Klayman. And Larry is the founder of Freedom Watch USA and Judicial Watch, two incredibly important organizations. A lot of people following Larry on Twitter, so you should get on there if you haven't been doing that. Larry, anything you'd like to leave us with on this fine Friday evening?
I want to thank you for your support. What you do is so vital because you allow me and others to get the truth out. It's not in any way watered down. You know, I watch Fox, but it's watered down on Fox. And we need people like yourself to get out the truth. And people that say that we're conspiracy theorists and that we're way out there and far right, you know, yeah, we're far right because we're right. And we have to take our stand. The founding fathers were far right compared to King George. And keep that in mind. And I also want people to keep in mind that I do believe that God is on our side and we will prevail.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. And it is important that people who enjoy the type of information that Crowdsource the Truth is bringing you, you've got to become monthly sponsors on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Even $1 a month or $5 a month goes a long way towards keeping the company financially healthy and keeping these types of broadcasts coming. We heard from Pete Santilli earlier today. We've got Charles Ortel coming on Sunday, of course, with another one of his amazing reports. Larry, it's always a real pleasure to speak to you. You're just full of great information, experience, and insight. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to our next conversation.
Mutually. Thank you, Jason. Have a great weekend.
Take care, you too. And thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.